so often in organizations, we block conversations. So we're trying to defend or justify the things that aren't working or what we're not doing well versus like digging a little more and getting real about like why we're not doing that thing well. I think a lot of times environments can get really political and people are afraid to actually have conversations that are genuinely going to help the ecosystem.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Coffee Break Podcast, where our mission is to share business ideas, practices, and strategies while we enjoy our cup of coffee. Today's guest is Dr. Brooke Stuart, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the psychology of business and how it relates to your organization. Lots of practical advice, talking a lot about the creating an ecosystem that is in direct correlation to the culture of your organization, how they support each other, and ways that you can improve relationships, improve conversations inside your organization. Buckle up for a really fun and informative conversation with Dr. Brooke. But before we do that, we do want to ask you to subscribe if you haven't already. It's a very simple thing to do. There's a button wherever you're listening to this that says subscribe. Make sure you click that so you can get the latest episode every single Tuesday when it comes out. We also do a video version of this as well on YouTube and Facebook. You can search that by just searching Loc-Doc Security on any of those platforms or just Googling Loc-Doc Security Podcast, and you're going to find a wealth of information there. And you can subscribe so you won't ever miss an episode. So make sure you do that. It's absolutely free. We don't even charge for it. So that's something you need to do right now. But in the meantime, we'll grab a cup of coffee and get ready for this conversation.
We got so much to say. We got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes, and it's time for a coffee break. It's time for a coffee break. Oh, yeah.
Well, we have a doctor in the house today. Dr. Brooke, thank you for joining us. This is not a virtual telemedicine visit, though. So we're going to be talking about things outside of that. Thank you for joining us all the way from Orlando, Florida.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to dive into these topics today. I had my coffee too. I know we were just discussing it, but what kind of black coffee are you drinking over there?
It's some form of Ethiopian bean that is, it's an Americano. So it's 2 shots of espresso with equal parts water.
Nice. Mine's the exact opposite. It's like some fluffy collagen, almond milk, espresso drink.
Yeah, this is pretty much
zero sugar though. Zero sugar.
There you go. Yeah, I used to, and I still do on occasion, but don't put a lot of dairy into my coffee. I used to do it a lot, and over about the last year and a half, I cut all of that out and changed a lot of my my diet. So anyway, so that's what I go to, and it's an easy, quick cup of coffee that I drink about 6 cups a day.
That's amazing.
All right, so let's get into it. Before we start into our topic of conversation, which I see you have a University of Miami plaque behind you, so I'm guessing that's where you went to college and got your doctorate from?
I went to undergrad at University of Miami, studied psychology and anthropology. Actually, I was originally in the business school, entrepreneurship, and I never thought I would be in the medical field. And I played golf for University of Miami, was in the entrepreneurship program. And then I literally woke up one day and realized I kind of wasn't that interested in what I was up to. And I had been focused on sports psychology for so long. I kind of took a turn and started to kind of dive into studies I was passionate about. And since then, I really began to study medicine, and I've kind of been on this this journey of learning and now teaching as well. But I got my doctorate from a school in California and my master's and doctor in Oriental medicine and from a school in Orlando, Florida. So I've been to a couple of schools, but.
All right, very cool. You just gave me a lot of information. I'm very intrigued. Did you say you played golf at the University of Miami?
I did. It was actually a huge part. I think anyone who gets into a holistic field or into this field, it really comes to it through personal experiences. Mm-hmm. And now it's becoming more known because of how much information we're sharing on the internet. But then I started to learn about diet, lifestyle, stress response, mental health through sports psychology, through the golf world. I was always so interested in it. And so I played golf at UM until I didn't.
Until you didn't. Okay. I want to circle back around to that because from the sports psychology part of that and relating to golf and application and everything else. So I want to really dive into that at some point. So we'll come back to that. But before we do, we've really kind of jumped ahead. We have to do rapid fire. I know you're trying to get out of it. Rapid fire, 5 randomly selected questions just to get under your skin with unknown point values, and then we give you a score at the end. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Question number 1. What is something that you find what do you find extremely difficult that most people find simple?
Directions, lefts and rights. Man, I could go on.
Yeah, you do that little trick there?
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm totally impaired by the way the maps tell me. I mean, I don't think I could get anywhere without Siri. So
I struggle following maps. So I rarely go anywhere without having navigation on. The challenge is, and my wife gets on me quite frequently because I don't actually follow the turns. So it's telling me that I'm supposed to turn, and then I realize a few miles down the road that it continues to tell me to make a U-turn because I missed a turn. So it's a challenge. Question number 2, what was the last dream that you can remember?
Ooh. I used to have this weird dream about, have you ever been to a gymnastic studio where there's blocks, where there's foam blocks? I don't know, but it's something
like that you jump into?
Yeah,
Okay.
you jump into, you do like backflips into. Anyways, I've had very many dreams going through these gymnastics blocks. So that's, I guess, the last dream I remember vividly.
That's very intriguing. I don't think I've ever jumped into foam blocks before. I wouldn't consider myself to be a gymnast, but I
haven't since the age of 4, but somehow I'm still dreaming about it.
Still thinking about it. All right, question number 3. What's the best trick someone has ever played on you?
Oh my gosh. The best trick somebody's ever played on me. My mom is really good at April Fools. I can't really think of exactly what she's done, but she's pretty tricky.
Pretty tricky. All right. Question number 4. What will be your go-to story when you're old?
Oof. My go-to story when I'm old. Well, I don't know. They're changing my mind and switching into psychology and anthropology. It's kind of like a deeper meaning to me, but that's kind of a go-to story because I felt like I really got in touch with my inner voice versus just kind of living out other people's dreams. So if I'm going for kind of like a meaningful story, that may be it. Funny story, I could probably think of many that are inappropriate at best.
I think I want to circle back to that one in just a moment. But last question, number 5. What was the last meltdown that you witnessed?
Well, when I'm working with people, the healing process is extraordinarily emotional. So I would say I witness kind of like quote unquote meltdowns on a daily basis. However, I also see that sort of like Phoenix Rise experience at the same time. So I kind of see them often as one and the same, where if you're able to work with and create an ecosystem for that meltdown that's healing and compassionate, it can quickly transform. So that's now obviously if it's personal or more familial friendship, that would be something else I'd have to like think about. But in terms of meltdowns every single day.
The last one that I saw was at a restaurant, and there was a young lady sitting there eating by herself, and all of a sudden, a gentleman decided that he was going to sit at her table while she was eating, and it did not go well. I was like, what in the world is going on here? Anyways, okay. Thank you for participating in Rapid Fire. We're going to give you a score of 703.
Woohoo! Winning already.
All right, let's jump into kind of the conversation and wrap this around a little bit about relationships in the work environment. So this is, as I was kind of preparing for this, I was looking over some of your information and just kind of doing some research and thinking the direction that we want to go. One of the topics on there was listed about relationships in the workspace. And I found that very interesting. Obviously, with businesses of any size, you're dealing with people. You're either dealing with other team members, with peers, or you're working with partners, or you're working with customers. But in any level of business, there is interaction between people. Managing and navigating those relationships can always be a challenge. So I guess if that was a setup for us, a little bit of a start of a path that we can kind of go down, where are some challenges that you see when you're dealing with some of your clients, or that you're dealing with businesses, about managing those relationships on the inside?
So I think all relationships start on the personal individual level, but then as a company, there's an ecosystem that is delicate, but we can also create a really resilient foundation around. And I think one of the most interesting things that I find through and through, time and time again, is that you can't fake or force a healthy ecosystem. It actually is or isn't. And the second we get to that space, we can actually get real about what the real issues are and how to resolve them. And I think so often that starts with leadership, with kind of top down, but it's also very much bottom up. And a lot of times my work with leadership, I'm lucky enough to work with leadership that is interested in outside opinions. I think it takes a lot of confidence to have outside opinions sort of come in and guidance come in, because it's kind of vulnerable, right? It's something you've genuinely created, you work within, you don't know what they're going to say. And so I think often I'll come in and they'll tell me, okay, certain employees have like confidence issues, or this gets a little negative, or it's hard to like lift people up. And I think first and foremost, what's cool about the people I work with is that they're very interested in taking ownership. And if leadership isn't interested in taking ownership, they just kind of want to place blame on coworkers or employees. It's so, and we can still on some level change the ecosystem, but it's limited by the capacity that the leader is willing to take ownership. And so if the leaders are completely on board, then it's so much easier to work with, because there's not kind of like an extraneous noise that's inhibiting the channels of communication. But if we're all able to take ownership, even like specific employees, I think that that's really interesting when everyone's willing to take ownership and kind of build something together in a coherent way that uplifts the whole system. And that, of course, doesn't mean that everything's perfect, but as a through line, if that's the intention and commitment, and we keep coming back to that, it's almost like we can step up very differently. So I think in working with teams and organizations, that's always the first thing I want to bring about. It's like, how can we create an ecosystem to where authenticity is allowed? Honest conversations that may be difficult to handle are actually encouraged, but there's also this flip side of being able to shift the tides and to kind of like up the vibes in various ways. So in my work, I find that I get to deal with a lot of dark stuff and a lot of light items as well. And obviously most of it's in between, but being able to go to both places and having a framework that can hold that, I think, is the most powerful driver for creating open channels of communication. And at the end of the day, for business leaders that are interested in sales, results, productivity as well. But the happier each individual is, the more productive they are as well. And so it kind of works both ways. And sometimes it's chicken or egg, but typically we're able to identify like first steps and then go from there.
So just from a definition standpoint, the way that you're using ecosystem, can you give me a practical application to that inside of my business?
Absolutely. So in terms of ecosystem, I'm talking about environment. Like when you walk into the building, or if you're a virtual office, if you walk into the workspace, right? Maybe it's a channel chat or something like that. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What is it like when you greet your coworkers? What is it like when you talk to your boss? Like, what is that? Is there noise? Is there kind of like blame going on in the background? Or is it really healthy? Like when the leader says, hey, how how is your day, right? Like, do they actually care? And you can't really fake that, or is it just actually words? And so that would be a part of the ecosystem, but also I think a lot about health. So for example, like, how are the lights in the office? Like, how is, for example, are there healthy snacks around? Like, is there, like, organic items, water, like things that actually are proven to boost productivity as well? Like, are workers encouraged to take a break after certain screen time? Like, are they motivated by things that matter to them? Or is it more of just like, oh, this is the basic thing that is supposed to motivate everyone? So, and obviously there's a balance to that, but they're all items to kind of consider practically what, in terms of like that ecosystem, like where are we at when it comes to all of that culture, individuals, communication styles.
Gotcha. So that's what I was hearing, and I was trying to confirm. So you're when you use the word ecosystem, you're kind of roughly relating to the culture of the business.
Yeah. Culture of the business, but also practicalities, like, for example, standing desk versus not. And obviously everybody has a preference, but I mean, something like a chair can literally create pain in someone's physical body, which will obviously take away and become a distraction. So even simple things like that and are kind of important to listen to people in terms of like what they're suggesting as well. So when I work with an organization, I meet with the leaders first. I understand what it is that they want. So maybe it's to boost sales, right? To build confidence, different things of that nature. Then I survey all of the individuals that work there, and I learn about, what's distracting them, where they see the issues, what are the issues in the workplace for them, what do they think could improve, and where does the problem lie? Where does the solution lie? And then I survey on a number of other questions. And then we give them like a foundations toolkit. So just things that they can begin to reference. And typically I'll come in, I'll do a personalized sort of like workshop evaluation. And then we'll send the leaders homework and kind of like specific like homework to each individual in the organization. And so those are typically like, I kind of see it as very similar to how I work with a patient in private practice, where there's an intake, a case review, to where we personalize a treatment plan, and then we begin to implement it. So that, which can be obviously in my private practice, anything from like dietary change, supplements, to more how are we working with the stress response? How do you see, your life experiences? How do you actually deal with the challenges that are coming up? And so it's very, very similar in terms of how I work with teams in organizations on that level as well.
So when it comes to the perspective of a business, you have, and I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding what you just said. You have a culture in an organization, but then you also have some physical components of it as well. So I would say, a culture is behaviors, beliefs, and values. And then the ecosystem is kind of attached onto that of the environment in which people are working or actively doing whatever it is that they're doing. Is that a better way to understand that?
That's a great way to understand it. Because, for example, if somebody is struggling with health issues, right? Like, let's say their energy is low. That can be two things. That can be one, for some reason, they're not looking forward to being in your company, right? And which is like, that can hurt as a leader.
Sure.
But for some reason, they're not drawn to being present for what they're up to in your company. The other side of the equation is they can physically be in a lot of pain. So actually, like maybe there's inflammatory markers that are showing up. Maybe there's issues at home that they're checked out into instead of working. So I think just in general, and being present and productive. So I think it's both. It's being able to create a culture to where people are interested in their health and growth personally and professionally. And so it's kind of that both and sort of experience. But if everybody is interested and invested in taking ownership of that, I mean, the culture just expands in astronomical ways.
At Loc-Doc Security, we believe your camera system should provide more than just surveillance. Being able to see exactly what's going on at your place of business from your phone or computer is fantastic. But what if there were more analytics giving you the ability to improve your business operations? Track how many people visited your location, stopped by your display, and even how often they passed by your store. Be alerted if someone was loitering, vandalizing your business, or even dumping trash. It's time for you to take advantage of this technology. Contact us today for more information about our cloud-based camera systems. Loc-Doc Security, helping you protect your people and property.
So I want to play devil's advocate just for the sake of this conversation, because I don't necessarily feel this way, but I'm hearing people say this in the background. So to this point, we have to create a good environment for our team to be able to activate. We need to make sure we have good benefits. We've got a nice place to work, all these features and functions. And now also we have to help care for their psychological environment.
That's a great, yes, continue.
Yeah, that's kind of, I guess, but the carry on of the thought is, why is that my responsibility to take on that one more responsibility of care?
So I actually don't think it's your responsibility or the leader's responsibility, but I do think what's important is that they choose, depending on your organization, right? And depending where you're at, what's available, obviously you have to start somewhere. But I actually think, so for example, with my brother's company, he runs an insurance company. His employees are all extraordinarily growth oriented, and they actually have like a book club. They're interested in eating healthy, hitting the gym together, different things like that. He has chosen, like, that's not by accident that he has those employees, but he's also had to kick bad seeds out, and not that they're like, maybe they're great for someone else's company in a different position, but for his, they are not a right fit. So I think as a leader, that's where you come in, and you have to be intentional, because it's about the whole, it's about everybody that works for you. So if you have poison sitting in seat 4, like that literally infects seat 5, 6, 7, 8. And obviously at the end of the day, what you're looking to accomplish as an organization. So, it's different if there's like a bad day and they're owning it and resilient, but it's also important to pay attention to when they're trying to place blame and there's a consistent characteristic of being irresponsible and not interested in taking accountability. I think as a leader, it is important to genuinely care, or if you actually don't care about your employees, to have somebody that actually does. And to, because for example, like empathy and compassion, it's obviously valued in the business world, but it's not actually everybody's strength. And so I think there's a part of like owning what actually is for each individual and working with each other's strengths, but also very much being unafraid to let go of what doesn't work and also optimize what does, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. I appreciate you clarifying that, because I think that's, again, I'm just kind of processing this on a lot of different levels and understanding how this value impacts or how this can help impact your organization. So, the way that I'm hearing you say this, and I guess just to kind of reverberate some of this, the psychological well-being of your team is of the utmost importance of any other component that you might have in your organization. And if that is something that is not paid attention to or ignored, then it has other detrimental impact or detrimental effect just because you're not aware of it or not paying attention to it. And I think a lot of times what I've heard from people is in the business world is you focus more on the effects and less of the cause. And what I'm hearing you say is get more intentional about the cause so that is something that is impacted, and then you're less concerned about the effects. Maybe
Yes.
a better way to say it.
I love that. And I think that's a great way to say it. And I think the idea there too is, right, because I think there's always this kind of like black or white mentality when it comes to, should I be focused on our goals and results or the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the real answer is both. I think it's actually really helpful and important to like have, I've worked quite a bit with my brother's company, and he's kind of on the same page as I am. And, he has like a board, and each employee has like their individual goals, like their purpose, their why sitting right in front of them on their desk, and they hold each other accountable. But then the idea is, how can you enjoy and drop into the process more and more and more? Another way to drop into the process is to feel safe in your position, which is hard to kind of get to because so many of us live our life in fight, flight, freeze, like wired for hypervigilance, looking for like everything that's wrong, right? But what if we can create an ecosystem of safety where I'm actually able to drop into my inbuilt capability and actually engage in the process and in learning itself, knowing that I know my goals, I know my why, and every time I forget, I can be reminded. Like I have a way to remind, I have a way to work through that I am safe and can plug into this next call, this next email, this next interaction. So I think that there's something interesting about feeling safe in being able to open up, but also there's that part of like, I have to be driven genuinely by my vision, by my goals, and actually remind myself of that alignment and why I'm up to what I'm doing, in order to begin to kind of like evaluate in a more effective way what does and doesn't work and why. Because so often in organizations, we block conversations. So we're trying to defend or justify the things that aren't working or what we're not doing well versus like digging a little more and getting real about like why we're not doing that thing well. You know what I mean? Which can play at security, all kinds of things.
I'm in the middle of a book right now called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And a couple of the things that they talk about there is, number one, making sure that you're allowing space for candor. The second one is eliminating gossip. And the third one, which is just 3 of the 15, is helping with building a sense of integrity inside of the organization. And when everything we're talking about right here, those things keep popping back in my head because I hear you saying genuine conversation, and to me, I hear candor. There's lots of books out there around it, and it sounds simple in theory. Actual practicality of it is trying to bring those people together to have a genuine conversation or having candor without it turning into a negative conversation. So from that standpoint, when you're coming into an organization to help with that, and you say you have conversation with the leadership and you say, well, these folks right here really struggle to get along. Is that when you dig into that, is that part of your assessment to understand why they're not getting along and what's the kind of underlying real issues there? Or is that just a part of understanding, going back to the ecosystem and taking ownership of one's actions?
I think a couple of things. I think a lot of times when people understand and have awareness around how unhealthy gossip is, or if they don't have a way to process it, right? So maybe they don't feel like they can talk to somebody about it actually, right? So it just stays in the gossip realm and kind of into that like toxicity. So I think when they begin to understand, oh, this is so unhealthy, but also potentially there's an actual solution that I feel safe enough to proceed with. I think a lot of times environments can get really political and people are afraid to actually have conversations that are genuinely going to help the ecosystem. So the more that, and that's where I think that integrity comes in from the leadership, and each individual can take ownership of that integrity to create, I think it's like a group agreement in a way, to create a space to where people can feel safe coming to each other, talking things actually through. So there's not this noise in the background, because it just can't be faked. Like it's still there and it will come out one way or another. We can only hold things in for so long. And so the answer to that kind of like depressed, suppressed state is expression, but effective expression. And I think that there's, candor is not just candor, right? It's actually so, like you were saying, it's so important. I went into my brother's office for 5 minutes And my brother is very intense and he loves having meetings, like drilling, he is like straight up David Goggins in business flesh. And that is how he rolls in this world. Now, for example, I watched this meeting take place. Right after the meeting, everybody in the company went to go play this basketball game. Okay. The whole company lit up with the basketball game. In the meeting, there was like this depression taking place. I told David this and he was like, it was very uncomfortable to make a change like that because he's used to being like this intense, person. But I'm like, David, lighten up. Like people literally see what the team is like if they're playing more basketball, literally. And guess what? I actually recommend less meetings for you. I am not kidding. The second he started to implement strategies, they had their best month ever within just the idea that he had within that month, because you can see when people are connecting, when there's a lightness and a candor, that creates actual physiological energy and excitement to be there. That's part of being like, oh, I love it here. And now it's a draw. I don't have to be, I'm not working under duress. I think it's important to be like, hey, like last month was rough, right? But then at the same time, potentially like opening it up and freeing the environment so that there's actually like this other thing taking place at the same time that hopefully begins to take precedence over this. So it's every organization's different. There may be another organization where it's the flip side. There's like too much lightness, too much fun, too many happy hours. And it's actually important to get a little bit real with your employees and say, like, this is our purpose. This is what's actually going on. You actually matter in this organization to the bottom line, right? And so instead of like avoiding that conversation through endless happy hours, hoping it takes care of itself, maybe you actually talk to people like that. Maybe they actually see that you're a bit vulnerable. Actually, like this is a web. We're all working together, that kind of thing. So it's obviously dependent, but.
So you gave some really good examples there. Here's my question on that. How do you navigate which extreme you go to from one to the other? Because I've seen this happen before, probably have been guilty of it myself. You go from one extreme to the other, or how do you navigate? You just walk in one morning and be like, man, it feels too stuffy in here. Let's do something different. Like, is it just being attuned to what's going on in the environment that's there at that current moment? Or is there, I guess, more scientific methodology around it?
So I think it's really listening. My job has to do with listening. And it also has to do with recognizing that I do not know more than anybody who is living, breathing, working in that organization. And so going into it that way and just listening and kind of like assisting the leadership and employees and recognizing their inner voice with that, like what they're actually noticing, but like organizing it, just kind of like clearing it up and, paying attention and noting different things. Obviously I can only see what I actually see, or, I'm only able to assist in how much information I actually have and I'm able to read through. I think that I don't have like certain like research or studies off the top of my head when it comes to these things. But I think that, there's probably like anything, there's typically like that balance, right? Like of like, okay. And it's also very iterative. It's not like, I think even in the health world, I think so many people see regression or the experience of symptoms again as a kind of as like a one step forward, two steps back. Very, very often it's 3 steps forward, 1 step back. And that's natural. That's still an upward trajectory. So I think as long as the whole environment and each individual is open to coming back to that conversation of the intention, of the commitment, of what is and isn't working and potentially why, it's kind of like, okay, that's what creates this continual trajectory of growth that's really important. So I don't necessarily think we have all the answers. There's like a certain like model, but I think if we're able to have a way that we can work with what's coming up in a way that we can begin to see things and implement strategies and recognize like, yes, there will be points where we take a step back, but all in all, it's like this upward trajectory. That is really how the healing process or growth orientation actually works. Extraordinarily, like, there's memes on Instagram that say like healing is nonlinear, right? I think growth is extraordinarily nonlinear, and it's really not always about the experience itself. It's about how we work with the experience, how we perceive it, how we interpret it, how we interact with it, and then the practical choices that we're making that are in alignment with our vision for the company, paying attention to and connecting to, listening to what the people involved have to say, what they're seeing as well.
Fight back against the spread of germs with specialty design door hardware. From arm hooks and crash bars to wave to open, at Loc-Doc Security, we have the right fit for any situation. Arm hooks can be retrofitted to doors with existing pull handles. Adding crash bars can reduce even more touch points while retaining ease of exit. And for those looking to remove touch points altogether, we offer wave to open solutions enabling you to command the door from afar. Reduce touch points and live healthier with Loc-Doc Security.
I want to take a sharp left turn in the conversation real quick because I think you've just given a lot of valuable information and to unpack that. But I want to just take a quick detour. You mentioned that you played golf for the University of Miami, and that it also opened up your interest in sports psychology. Mm-hmm. What did you learn from the concept of a mentally strong or the mental part of golf that brought some intrigue around sports psychology?
Absolutely. I'm so passionate about this. And I think that, when you go into a counseling or a medical field, I love the kind of like the deep, dark stuff too. I love working with it because all I see is truly untapped potential and solutions. But I think what's so cool about sports, athletics, about working with teams and organizations is that it's highly focused on a growth orientation, but it takes what it actually takes. So it's like you have to have this core of keeping the main thing. And a guy named Trevor Moad talks a lot about this. He's a mental skills specialist in sports. But a lot of different professionals have different ways of saying what I'm about to, but it's almost like if you do the fundamentals and the basics extraordinarily well, you will get extraordinary results. And so certain things like reminding yourself that you're capable, right? Like actually putting in the work to practice. You can't fake or force that or quote unquote manifest that on your couch. You actually have to align your actions with what it is that you're looking to achieve. And I think that's the cool part about mental skills in sports is that it's highly expansive because you're very, very much focused forward. Even though, for example, that I was working with this one professional golfer and he had allergies. And when we cleared the allergies, he was able to get more into the zone and tap into that resilience, which are all qualities that are important to success. So when we're looking at how we create a successful athlete, I think a lot has to do with how we learn from our experiences, resilience, connecting to yourself, the present moment, to your strengths, and being highly aware of the weaknesses too, but in a constructive way and being present enough to mobilize, focus, work with the nervous system in terms of what you can do, all that you have, and really being able to like mobilize that. So resilience is a huge one. Confidence, building confidence, which has to be earned. That trust within yourself has to genuinely be earned. Mm-hmm. It's not like you can just say, hey, I'm confident. You have to have the choices that actually add to that bank account, right? Like it's like tokens in the confidence bank. Like every time you wake up at 5:45, you keep that promise to yourself. All of these things are highly important. And I think it starts with fundamentals. I'll say this really quickly. I had this score. I would always put this on my scorecard. I learned this from a coach named Larry Rinker. He would always say intention and commitment, heart and execution, fairways, greens, chipping and putting. Or so there was this little thing. And I think having reminders like that of just focusing on the basics and doing those extraordinarily well and paying attention to what those are versus the shiny objects. Not that you can't play here, but staying here and not neglecting this ever, I think is the way to really get to where you want to be in an organization or as a professional athlete.
So if I follow what you just said, those factors that can be applicable over in the business world as well. There's a direct correlation to that.
Yeah. I think it's so exciting when somebody is growth oriented versus trying to just like, for example, if I am growth oriented, right? I'm not just trying to fix all the problems. I'm focused on the solutions and cultivating the solution, which, by the way, you then begin to move forward to such a degree to where the problems aren't problems anymore when you're focused on the ins and outs and building up that solution. So instead of just attacking and reflexing to the issues or problems, now you're playing on a totally different field. So I think a lot of that has to do with how we perceive different things and actually being able to cognitively formulate it into action that then can mobilize it versus kind of like staying stuck over here and pinballing around.
Very intriguing. Brooke, Dr. Brooke, I want to be very mindful of our time today. You've given a lot of information. I've got a full page of notes here. I think that a couple of takeaways that I've gotten so far is authenticity needs to be allowed, so that difficult conversations are encouraged. And I think that the other major takeaway that I picked up was giving folks an effective way to express their opinions or their I guess feelings is a big solution to improving the depressed or suppressed state. Those were two big things that kind of stood out to me through the conversation today. I think those are practical applications. And I also believe that you bring some things to light, some kind of self-evaluation, even such to say, how can we continue to be aware of the environment inside of our organization and adapt and make sure that we don't become so stringent. Everything has to be this way so that we can understand how the organization is operating.
Can I actually ask a kind of like a personal business question?
You can.
Okay, and feel free not to answer. Do you guys so I read on your profile that you are a Christian, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have that as a part of your organization? Is that how does that work in your organization?
It is the way that I've tried to describe it to this point is because a lot of folks will say that this is a Christian organization. I don't see it as a Christian organization because what we do is not is not connected into it that way. I do believe that a lot of the values that we have will loosely align with that. I also don't hide my Christianity or my belief system, but I also don't impose it on other people. So the way that we try to operate with that is we open our meetings in prayer. We have one of our team members shares a scripture of the week on our Monday morning conference call, but we try to have it as interwoven, but not, we're not walking around here with scripture every day and in that way. So I think that some of our values align with it and some of our operations will be in association with it. It's something that we don't hide, but it's also something that we're not driving around with fish on our vehicles either.
I think that's beautiful. And I actually, in a big, big way, think prayer is the most powerful form of medicine. And I always tell my patients as well, like whether you believe in the mysteries of biology or God or Jesus Christ or Archangel Gabriel, look, I think that prayer for so many reasons is the most powerful form of medicine. And it's very mobilizing. It's very much like, okay, like potentially here's the issue, or this is what we're praying for. And also we have this overwhelming support inside of us and outside of us that's able to kind of like work with and up the vibration of the organization. But also something I've been thinking a lot about, and I feel like I can say this here, and I don't mean it in any like seriously, rigidly spiritual way, but I really, this hit home. I was in a Bible study called The Armor of God, and she was talking about being seated at the right hand of the Father and just you're victorious, right? And I was talking to my brother David about this too. I'm like, if you're a leader and you believe in your organization and you genuinely have that based aspect and are taking the moves to choose it before it chooses you, going with your heart, like experiencing that seated feeling, then you don't need to reflex. You can take a moment to have space to decide what it is you would like to do. You don't have to take everything personally. So I think that kind of calm focus, vision from a leader is probably the most important way to change the ecosystem of an organization. And I just have never heard a better way I don't have a better image in my mind of how to say that other than seated is different than at war, than running around, than standing in kind of like a posture of reflex. Seated is like knowing you've got this. And the more you can kind of message that and see each individual in your organization as you've got this, it can be very, very empowering. So,
no, I think I appreciate you sharing that and asking that question. That it's something that is a challenge at times, right? Because you want the best for your team, you want the best for the people inside of your organization, and navigating that from all levels is taxing. Like the easy way is to have a stringent, here's your metrics, here's your numbers, you just do what you have to do. When you, what I feel like when you introduce the I guess more empathetic side of things, it becomes a challenge, right? It becomes a challenge because I guess at the end of the day, I feel like it's something that I don't want to move away from. Like I fully embrace that side of it, but I feel like it also creates. Or what I've seen from other people, I guess the experience on the other side is other folks are just so hardcore and so stringent in the up and down and not having the empathetic and not having that environment that you don't meet the numbers, you're not following the rules, you're done. Not understanding the why is I think trying to get in and understand the why is the challenging part.
Definitely. And like you said, I think there's both. And it's like you can get so sucked into the emotions and different things that's out of balance too. And then you can get totally taken over by strategy that's also out of balance. So being able to find that, I definitely think is key.
Dr. Brooke, thank you again for the conversation today. Lots of good advice, lots of good information and notes that I've taken here. Really challenging on ways that we interact with our organization, interact with our team. Some of the, I guess, personal challenges on our end is how can we make the environment more appealing for the folks that are already here? How do we maybe take a little break from some of the regimented things that we're doing and create a little bit of space for some loose and more fun interaction? Those are some things that we can actually take as an initiative here in our organization, and maybe you can do the same in yours. Thank you for joining us today. A brand new episode comes out every Tuesday, so make sure you subscribe because there's more conversation like this coming your way. If you want to find out more, you can visit us on our website, Loc-Doc.net/podcast. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on the Coffee Break Podcast.